I wish to extend my warmest greetings to the people and the Government of India on the occasion of the 79th Independence Day of the Republic. I will be brief, but I do want to touch a little bit on how we as a new emerging political party thinks of the sort of evolving relationship between India and Nepal and how we wish to take it forward. There's a very famous economist called Simon Kuznets. Many of us have heard of the GDP, the gross domestic product. He actually invented it. He designed the original national accounts surrounding it. So he's attributed to have said during his distinguished tenure as an economist at Harvard University that there are 4 types of countries in the world. One is developed, second is developing, and third is Japan, and fourth is Argentina. So if people recall, in the 80s, even earlier, 70s and 80s, when Japan was fast catching up, it almost threatened the economic dominance of the Western powers then, just like China is doing now. If we were to amend that very famous but very wise economic pronouncement, we could actually now say there are 4 kinds of countries in this century. It's developed, developing, China, and India. So they are onto categories in themselves. And this, I think if you dig deeper, is an immense opportunity for a country like Nepal, with China to the north and India to the south. So these kind of unique pairings between large and smaller countries is very rare. I was actually, once I looked at the world map and said, which other pairs of countries mimic the kind of relationship that India and Nepal have? There is no pair like that. One can come close. You can think of Brazil and Paraguay maybe. One is very big, the other one is kind of dependent on it. Russia and Tajikistan maybe. US and Canada, now quite controversial after Trump came, but they enjoyed that kind of proximity. South Africa and Lesotho. But none of them come close to the depth, to the intensity of the kind of relationship that we enjoy. But many countries with countries like ours, small countries like ours, with large, powerful neighbors, sometimes feel insecure. And in Nepal, there was this geo-ideological straitjacketing for decades. And that, I think, hamstrung the kind of relationships that we could have had in the last century. And this was entrenched by over 50 years of what I call Mahendrian nationalism and left-oriented rhetoric, which did a lot of damage to this very profound relationship. So we need to shed this baggage, and an aspirational, forward-looking, outward-oriented Nepal needs its big neighbors, and big neighbors like India also need smaller neighbors like Nepal who are pragmatic grown-ups. And this is what I feel. And in many events similar to this, I refer to a Chinese demographer called Hu Wanyang, who almost 90 years ago drew this amazing map of China. He split the Chinese territory into 2 halves, the western half and the eastern half. And he showed that 94% of the Chinese population actually live on the eastern half. So 94% of the Chinese population cover 50% of the eastern territory, and only 6% live on the western half, which adjoins Nepal. Now you look at a similar population density to the south. In 1/3 of the Indian territory that adjoins Nepal, 700 million Indians live. Right? Now this doesn't mean that we need to tilt everything towards India. It just means that the forms of connectivity that should join India and Nepal are different than the forms of connectivity that connect China and Nepal, right? So air connectivity might be much more important in our relationship with our northern neighbor, whereas towards the south, it is much more multidimensional, from water and rail links to road links to air connectivity, etc. And the current foreign minister of India, Mr. Subramaniam's father, who was a very Kautilya-like strategist of his own time during Indira Gandhi's era, He wrote in 1986, almost 40 years ago, that in the longer run, the imperatives of geography, cultural affinity, and international politics will bring home to our neighbors the facts of life and of real politics. So this was a very wise pronouncement. Nehru had this civilizational view, right? When India was dirt poor, around 1980, 1982, Nepal and India were equally poor, $200 per capita, etc. Now India is at 3,000, we're still at 1,500. But when Nepal and India on average were similarly impoverished, some of these longer term thinkers had this vision, this civilizational sense that we may have dipped in our fortunes at this particular time, but our eventual place in the community of nations is right at the top. We will regain, we will rebalance, we will revive, and we will reign. That was the attitude of people like Nehru and also K.S. Subramaniam. So I think against this backdrop, in the 21st century, both India and Nepal, very aspirational young folk are now at play in our politics and the economy. But this is going to be short-lived because given the demographic pressures, the fertility rate is coming down, life expectancy is going up. We'll become an aging society in about 3-4 years. The median age in our country is 25. In India, it's already close to 30. So this demographic urgency requires that we cooperate or expedite our engagements much more meaningfully. And this has to be done. And the challenge for us is to pursue what I call sovereign reciprocity. Sovereign reciprocity in a structurally asymmetric relationship, right? India is 50 times more populous, 100 times larger in economy. Per capita wise, it's double our level, it's twice as rich. So for India, these great power aspirations, it comes with geosecurity and other forms of socio-ecological vulnerabilities. For Nepal, our interest is faster development, straddling the hurdles posed by landlockedness in a manner respectful of its sensibilities and national pride. So if we pair our respective imperatives, I think we can work out a win-win agenda, which we can pursue along multiple channels. I often say that the relationship between India and Nepal is too important to be left just to the politicians. We need a multi-pronged approach. I see that, of course, enlightened political leadership and statecraft is necessary, of the kind I often recall, the great B.P. Koirala, for example, in the way he fashioned our place in this geopolitical space. We need competent collaboration through formal bureaucratic channels. So bureaucracy to bureaucracy relationship is exceptionally important. And the space that they design allows then the predictable rules of engagement on trade, on foreign direct investment, on concessional aid, etc. Then there's the fourth angle, which is seamless people-to-people mobility, from Kumbh to Shivaratri, from Medanta to Tata, from eye care to education. All this multi-pronged cooperation is necessary. And finally, it's informed dialogues through track 2 opinion shapers in the academia, in the think tanks, in the universities, and the media. So I think it's time to also de-emphasize this Westphalian concept of nation states, which have tended to divide. And we need to resort to this civilizational sense, the civilizational view of how our international relationships can be fashioned. And that is a more uniting kind of a notion. So let me conclude with the 4 agendas that our political party has prioritized, and we're digging deep, we're engaging with the different stakeholders in India, in Nepal, and trying to go beyond the cliched rhetoric. Let's get together, let's work together. What are those specific avenues where we can collaborate very meaningfully? So the first is under the rubric of thick connectivity, thin borders. I've actually said this to Prime Minister Narendra Modi when I met him at the Kautilya Economic Conclave, that when he came to our parliament in 2014 and he said, "Main Nepal ko hit kar dunga," highways, infos and transways, I thought that was a very meaningful agenda, something catchy that resonated with peoples of both the countries. But I told him in 2022 that not much has happened in honoring the scale and the ambition of what he laid out in 2014. Much progress has happened, but not living up to the grand ambition that he had. So we need to, I think, work on that. So this calls for connectivity, modes of connectivity in different spheres, which I've outlined. On shared production, I think Bhavaniji mentioned, on trade, FDI, etc. We need to go on this, the global production sharing model, or you can even regionalize that idea, and it's becoming much more important in the current climate. And we don't have much hope as a landlocked country, given the costs of trade, transit, etc. But in areas where clean energy can be used, manufacturing sub-segments which are labor intensive, I think that kind of production sharing modalities can be explored. And here we need anchor investments. The big names from India ought to be attracted. There are successful global examples where one company like Intel went to Costa Rica and lifted the entire country and shifted the economic structure of that country from banana farming to high-end electronic shipping. Something similar happened in Vietnam, for example. So it's not this generic call to invest in a particular country, but anchor investors who bring with them decades of credibility that works in this regard. So we need to, given the rise of the big international investors in India, they need to be quoted quite differently. The third area is clean energy. I don't need to elaborate on this. Clean electricity going forward is going to be the linchpin of all net zero paths. You make electricity clean, you make much more clean electricity, and you make almost everything run on electricity. This is the mantra going forward, and Nepal is well placed to take advantage of it. And here, cooperation from both our neighboring countries is going to be exceptionally important. And finally, on new modes of partnership. So it's not just, every year some of our journalists in the room sort of parse the finance minister's budget in India. MEA-ले यसपालि नेपाललाई कति छुट्याएछ भनेर हेर्छ हैन. अब त्यो 50-60 मिलियन भनेको it's peanuts relative to what could be achieved beyond the official grant world. There was a time when this was very important, but now I think we need to look to other forms of cooperation. I am particularly impressed by the mass social innovations that have been tried in India over the last 10 years, from Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, mobile, etc. This Ayushman Bharat covering low-cost insurance schemes, Digital India, Bheem, Udan, all this plethora of mass social innovations that we could emulate and borrow. And here, I think the results would be much higher than the officially accounted grant assistance that flows in a predictable fashion. That will be necessary to cement the building blocks, build some of the foundations. But the scale and the ambition that I alluded to earlier can only happen if we explore these new areas. So forward-looking, outward-oriented, deep, meaningful cooperation that is win-win, that is positive, that is constructive, and we need to shed the negative mindset that has often clouded this very vital relationship between India and Nepal going forward. Thank you very much.